the slide in order to meet up some more contestants along the way. So let me just start. Okay, good evening, of course, from Indonesia, and good day to all of you, because we have been shattered with many different timelines. So, but it's good that we are now gathering here in the same purpose. Okay, we are joining back again in this episode of My English Club, and the title is Integrating Culture in ELT, Why and How. Okay, let me continue. Before we start, let's take a few moments to say hi from each of you. I would like you to answer this. Hi, I am who. I'm joining the session from where, and also I am. I would like you to. I am inviting you to answer this in the inbox chat, please, so I get to know as well. So welcome. We have just entered our session. I would like you to drop your introduction in the chat box, telling okay. Okay, thank you. Hi, Rich. Hi, Paulo. Oh, Isa from Nigeria. Okay, come on, keep it coming. All right. Okay, feel free to fill more information about yourself in the chat while I'm continuing this presentation. Okay. All right, so next I would like to give a little insight about us. So My English Club, it's a non-profit community of practice dedicated to English language teachers or future teachers from all backgrounds worldwide. And of course, we are providing discussion forums and also workshops. Also, Bangun Tunas Cerdas Indonesia Foundation has been part of this, and it is a legal umbrella institution for My English Club, and it focuses on education and sustainable development goals in general. Okay, so about our mini PD workshop, let me give you a little piece of information. So it's a low commitment. It's probably around 90 to around 2 hours. Okay, yet insightful mini workshops. The trainers are academics and practitioners in applied linguistic, English language teaching or ELT, and quality education. It is aimed at enlarging the teacher's perspective on the current and relevant issues in ELT and enhancing the teaching skills. Held once a month and is open to every teacher around the globe. Okay, so here are the practitioners, also academics that maybe some of you are aware of, or maybe joined the previous episodes, but there are more to come. So we look forward for you to become part of this journey. All right. Next, as your facilitator today, there are two of us. Me, my name is Arga, and also uh, Richard will be joining us in the breakout room, of course. But before we go to the breakout room, there must be something interesting about this episode. And will be delivered by our presenter, Leviana Vinanda. So please, I would like to take a moment to introduce her. So Levi is the founder of My English Club, and she is a PhD student at the University of Southampton, UK, and a former English language lecturer at the Polytechnic Negeri Balikpapan. And here are several publications of Levi. It's pretty much it's a fresh articles that each of them representing her interest toward her subjects of study. Okay. Next, okay, here are some rundown to what we're going to have in this meeting. So we're going to have an opening with a particular amount of time, and the activity is more like introduction stage. And later on, we continue to interactive presentation. Okay, it's given by the presenter herself, and it's going to be around 50 minutes, and we have also question and answer for 20 minutes. Later on, we continue to hand-on activity. There will be a breakout room discussion. So you will be given 30 minutes in total. So inside of the room, you may share some of your thoughts. Perhaps there will be some question for you to discuss during the breakout room sessions. So make sure that you share some of your thoughts, and perhaps you may share also your opinion or maybe some good insight from the material that you will be given. And there, of course, will be sharing section, and the end we have to close this uh, episode as well. Okay. All right. So I would like to remind, as a reminder, so please remain in mute mode during the presentation, and please turn on your video whenever possible. So it's a condition. Okay. And you are welcome to be a discussant or a listener during a hands-on session. So it's okay if you prefer to become a listener, but it would be nice if you share a little bit about your thoughts as well. And of course, don't forget to have an exciting and productive discussion. Okay, just notes over here. There is a closed captions, and also this session is being recorded now. All right. Okay. Without further ado, I would like to give the stage for Levi. Levi, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Okay. I think I allow you can take the presentation now. You may present it now.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so
Okay, the floor
yeah.
is yours.
Yes, thank you, Arga. Yeah, thank you very much, everyone who's joining us today. It's a great honor and great fun for to share with you today. And more importantly, I look forward to the discussion sessions, which is actually at the heart of any of our events. Okay, now I would like to share my presentations. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Right. So our my part in this mini professional development workshop is in this part, in integrating culture in English language teaching. And I'm sure at some point in your practice, in our practice, because I was a practitioner as well, at some point in our practice, we must have integrate culture or cultural content in our teaching, whether intentionally or not, whether instinctively or not. At some point, I'm quite confident to say that we are quite familiar with this topic. So what I'm going to do today is actually to invite you to take you to get through of this topic, to revisit this topic again, but through some research lenses. But I promise it won't to be too theoretical or too academic, because I can't as well. So, but yeah, it's important to look at this this topic from research lenses. Okay. All right. So what to expect? I divide this presentations, this training into two big chunks. The first one is the why, and the second one is the how. And the why part, we are going to look at some of the reality check. And what I mean by reality check is we are going to look at some arguments and some reason why it's important and relevant to integrate culture in English language teaching, and what research has to say about it, what research suggests. And of course, we are going to look at some underlying theories. But again, I'm not going to go too far or too deep. But if you are interested, that you can contact us to get these presentations and also the relatable journal if you would like it. Yeah. And at the how part, we are going to again look at recommendations from research and also some classroom practice, which is also studied by research, yeah, in some research. So yeah, again, there are some theory, a little bit practice, and also to help us to understand what the theories, what's in the theory, and we are going to look at some quotes from researchers. Yeah. Okay. So the presentation today is about why it's relevant to integrate culture in English language teaching, and the even bigger question is why. Sorry, is how we are going to do that. That's the bigger question for practitioners, I think. So in order to do that, I would like to look at. Wait a minute. There, sorry. Yeah. So there are three perspectives and the theories that we are going to look at. The first is English as a lingua franca. The second one is global English language education. And the third one is something called transcultural language education. Don't worry if you're not familiar with this. I myself were not familiar with this until a few years back. Yeah, so don't worry about that. And we are going to get through of them, and we are going to use them as an avenue to understand the why and the how is relevant and important to integrate culture in our practice. Yeah. So I'm going through some of the definition and the key principles really quickly, and then we are going to look at the classroom implications. Yeah. Okay, let's get started. Let's start with English as a lingua franca. To give you some insight of this perspective, this is kind of an emerging field. And this is my research field. And in this room, there is also a colleague who is also a researcher in this field. And let's have a look at it. So to introduce you to some of the key points, key principles of ELF, I would like to show this to you. So few days ago in my English Club Instagram, we launched this poll. Yeah, so we launched this poll asking people some questions. Yeah, the first question was where English is spoken. Most of the voters say that it's worldwide and not limited to any territory. Some people, though, think that it's limited to the UK, US, and Australia. Now, I need to emphasize that there is no right or wrong in these questions. It's really just to see people perspective. Yeah. So the second one is who speaks English. So the second question is who do you think speaks English? Most voters say people around the world, regardless their locations. Now, some people think it's limited to American, British, and Australian. Now, the third question is who native English are. Native English speakers are. Yeah. Most people think that people who speak English since they were born. Some people limit the definitions to merely American, British, or Australian, and some people not sure. Yeah. Now, in the research of English as a lingua franca, the notions of native speaker and more importantly, native speakerism is something that we kind of challenge, not because it's not real. And of course, in reality, there are people who speak English, for example, since they were born. And so the English is their first language. It's a fact, okay? But the notions of native speaker entails hegemonic power. And that is something that in the research of English as a lingua franca, it's kind of a problematic, yeah. In practical level, in English language education, for example, that would be related to, for example, teacher recruitment. Yeah, but it's not a place to talk about it now. But I just want to give you some insight of what the research in this field entails. Now, in our poll, we also ask who are English speakers. Now, every voter says that English speakers are people from different cultural background. So not only American, not only British, not only Australian, but people around the world from different cultural backgrounds. Okay, this is exactly one of the key points or key principles in the research of English as lingua franca, that English language speakers, English language users are people from multicultural and multilingual background. Yeah. And what does it mean to integrate culture in English language teaching, or ELT? That means for many people, it means a culture of people around the world, integrate culture of people around the world. For some people, that means local cultures, yeah, and some people are not sure which culture to integrate in our practice, which is based on research is quite normal as well for a teacher to be unsure of which culture they have to integrate in their practice, and we're going to look at more into that later in this presentation. Okay, so let's look. This is the part where we are going to do some reality check, yeah, to answer the how, the why questions. Why is important and relevant to integrate culture in ELT? If you look at this figure, this fact, the infographic, I think you call this kind of thing as the infographic, yeah. So if you look at the second bullet point here, 1.35 billion people speaks English. And third bullet point says the majority aren't native speakers, or I prefer to call it L1 English speakers, or which means their first language is English. Okay, because again, for ELF researchers, for the researchers in English as a lingua franca, the notion of native speakers is quite problematic, but throughout this presentations, I am going to use the terms interchangeably between native speakers or the L1 English speakers. So the majority of English speakers are like us in this room. Apart from Richard, who are British, no one in this room is actually native speakers, yeah, including myself. Okay, and this is the reflection of what actually happened in the world today. In the contemporary communications, most speakers, more English language speakers are non-native, are not L1 English speakers. So it means something, right? Now, that's what we are going to look at soon. Again, this figure will show us that the number of non-native speakers of English are actually triple the number of the native speakers. Yeah. So there are more chance of us and our students to have the communication in English with other non-native speakers rather than with native speakers. And this entails something for classroom practice. And this is exactly where we are going to look at throughout the presentation. Yeah. Professor Brachkaru, in 1995, come up with this three concentric circle of English. If you look at this circle, which is I think is one of the earliest versions, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I think this is one of the earliest versions of the circle. As you can see, in the inner circle of English language users and or speakers, the inner circles are UK, US, Canada, Australia. The people who use English as the first language. And at the outer circle, there is the, well, I would say the Commonwealth countries, maybe. Yes, some of the countries who has relations with the UK at the colonial time and up to date, and so they may use English as their second language. And then the expanding circle are the rest of the words. Now, I hope it can give you some perspective of why there are more non-native speakers of English rather than the native speakers. Because actually at the expanding circles are the rest of the words. We are all there, basically. So of course, the numbers of non-native speakers are, much more than the native speakers. Yeah, that's actually one of the very heart of the research in English as a lingua franca. This is Professor David Crystals, one of the renowned British linguists, and one of his famous quotes says this. Yeah, I will let you read it for a bit here. So there are only 400 people, 400 million mother tongue speakers, those who use English as the first language, mainly in the UK, Ireland, US, Canada, Australia, and those countries. This means that every one native speaker of English, there are now 5 non-native speakers. That means the center of gravity in the use of English has shifted, not in the inner circle anymore, but it's expanding to the, to the expanding circles, because the number of non-native speakers are way more than the native speakers. And this will give a lot of consequence in English language teaching, including in the integration of culture, which is also at the very heart of research of English as a lingua franca, as we are going to look at. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry if I'm too fast. It's just because there are so many things to share, but so limited time. So, but yeah, sorry about that. Okay, now what the figures tell us so far. This means that most communications with English as the medium of communication will be very likely to occur between people with different L1 or between non-native speakers. Not only between us now, as again reflected with what happened in this room now, but also to our students in their future. It's more likely that in their future, they're going to communicate with people with other non-native speakers who has their own cultural background, who has their own linguistic backgrounds. And so therefore, at some points, we can say that this is relevant to integrate culture in English language teaching. But again, the big question is which culture and how? Yeah, that's we are going to visit these questions again soon. This is Barbara Sedelhofer, one of the godmother of the research in English language, English as lingua franca. And she said, English will naturally vary as it is appropriated and adapted to serve the needs and purposes of communities other than those in inner circle native speakers. That means there are now varieties of English, not limited to the inner circle varieties, which is the British variety or American variety or Australian variety, but it's more. There is Singaporean English, Thai English, Indonesian English, Italian English, and whatever. Because English naturally will vary and to appropriate and adapt to serve the needs of the community who use it, including the community of teachers like us. Yeah. Now, just to recap then, in short, in principle, English as a lingua franca talks about the communication between people who do not share the first language. This is not a variety, I need to emphasize. So ELF is not a variety, but this is an observation of what happened in communication using English, especially between people from diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds. That is ELF, or English as a lingua franca. Now, this is the fun part because I'm going to give you some example, and I would like to I would like to see your opinion about this. So this is so this is a real data. This is based off the observations, my observations when I hear people from a different cultural background speaks. Okay, so I usually do that. I listen to people speak and I start to take notes. So that's how nerd I am. So for example, like this one, let's look at the first example here. So S is a teacher who is delivering a presentation. Okay, the people in that room, yeah, the people in that room are internationals. Okay, and the teacher says blah, 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 and then she said, so my student need a data package. Now, my questions to you is, do you understand what she means by data package? If it's possible, could you give me a thumb up icon? Or if you can't give me a thumb up icon, then you can just give me some like a message on the chat box if you understand what a data package is. What she meant by data package. Yeah. And if you have another word for data package, what do you call that? If you understand what the data package means here, do you have another word to explain the same thing, data package? Yeah, I would like to hear from you if that's possible. If you don't know what she meant by data package, please also send us a message. Yeah, data package in the UK with often just say data and leave it at that. Yeah, just to say data. Yeah. Okay. I also look at the message from Ahmed. Hello, Ahmed. Maybe necessary vocabulary to understand her speech. Okay, yeah. Now, moving on to the second example. So Anne is a language owner, and she talks to one of her employee, which was, I think, Filipinos or Vietnamese. I wasn't sure, but also Southeast Asian. And she said to her, I will share. And the context is related to money. So I will share your payment. Now, my question is, what do you think that she means by I will share your payment? If you understand her, again, would you use another word? Or if you don't understand her, you can also let us know. Richard understands, okay? I will share your payment. Yeah, she just said I will share, and that's related to the money. Yeah. Let's see. I definitely understand, but I'll say that in different way. Oh, Rich, if that's okay, what do you understand by I will share your payment here?
I would understand that to mean like we can split the bill, or we can go halves, or I'll make a contribution to the payment.
Okay.
Here, but that's how I would understand that. But maybe they meant something completely different, you know.
Yes, you will be surprised, Rich. But yeah, okay. Let's go back again. Yeah, after we get through the number 2 and 4. So, in example M, a teacher in a discussion forum says, so she asked me, she's a teacher from Myanmar. And she asked me, so Levi, who I need to combine with in terms of focused group discussion. So we are doing a focus group discussions, and she wasn't sure who she needs to work with. And she come to me and say, oh, so Levi, who I need to combine with? Do you understand her? If you do you have another words to express the same meaning? Or you don't understand her at all? What do you think? This is interesting, right? How people use a different way to convey their meaning. And this is definitely very much influenced by their first language and also their culture. So let's see what people says here. Who I need to work with. Okay, Maha, thank you. And Paulo says to collaborate with. Okay. Take you with. Okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's really exciting to see how people use a different way to express the same thing. Now, the last example is in the casual dialogue. This is two students, okay? So L is an Indonesian student and A is Russian student, yeah? And L says to A, so I really have to go now because I will have tests for semester 2 tomorrow. Now, A, the Russian student, confused. A test? Now, my question is, do you understand why she confused? Why does the word test confuse her? If your student wants to say that they have a kind of a big task, the midterm task, what is the word that they will say, that they will use? Or what is the word that you use as a teacher to talk about the big task, like the midterm test? I personally would say midterm test. But yeah, what about you? What is the word you use? Exam might be more appropriate than test for an end of semester assessment. Okay, exam also. So Rich and Maha use exam, and Paulo thinks that it might be the pronunciations. Very possible, yeah. Or maybe the other person is used to another vocabulary like exam. Okay, global exam for Ahmed. Oh, but test is okay to me. Yeah. Okay. Now, let's get through of them really quickly. Yes, for number one, the teacher S actually meant, yes, the data, the internet data. Yeah, but she used the words data package. Now, the reason why I put it here, because it turns out some of the participant in that presentation, in that training, didn't understand her. Oh, what does it mean by data package? Yeah, I'm Indonesian, and of course I do understand her. In Indonesian translation, that would be paket data, which is exactly what the data package is if you translate it literally. Yeah. Now, at number 3, I leave number 2, the last one, because that's the most interesting thing, I think. For an example 3, who I need to combine with, yes. She meant like who should I work with? Who is my group? Basically, which one is my group, and so on. Yeah. But you can imagine how confused I was when she said who I need to combine with. I was like, wait, combine? It takes me lots of time to think about it. And it doesn't mean that her English is bad. No, she's a very proficient and very qualified English language teacher. It doesn't mean that her English is bad. It's just that that's the way she convey her meaning is really influenced by her first language, Burmese. Yeah. I don't know, Rich, you might able to help us with that. Why do you think she used that word who I need to combine with in the Burmese translation? I don't know. For example 4, the students were confused because the Russian student A used the word assessment. Yeah, so when L used the word exam, she didn't understand her. Now, number two, I will share by believe it or not, what she actually means is that she is going to pay the teacher's salary. So what she actually meant is that I will pay your salary. That's what she meant to say. But the reason why she used the word I will share, not I will pay or I will give, is because she is Indonesian with her first language is actually not even Indonesian, but it's an ethnic language called Batak language. That is first language, and then Indonesian, and then English. So therefore, in Batak words, they don't use the word give, but share. It's really complicated to explain, but that is why. I just want to show you that this is how people, cultural, and linguistic background will influence the way they speak English. And this is exactly what our student is going to face, in the future. So there must be something we can do about that, right? Yeah. So yeah. Okay. Now, classroom implication. and Arga say, "Wow." I know, Arga. It's really confusing for me as well. It's hard for me to understand her in the beginning. But again, it's not because her English is bad, no. But it's just because she used a different way to convey her meaning in English. Yeah. Okay. So one of the questions that the research in ELF, English as a lingua franca, in relations to English language teaching is actually, is it relevant to teach English solely based on the native, which means American or British model of English? It doesn't mean that we reject the English or the British or the American varieties, no. Especially if your students are facing high stakes exam like IELTS, TOEFL, whatsoever, that's actually still based on the native model of English. But teaching solely the British or American varieties in our classroom, is it still relevant? That's the big questions that researchers in ELF is keep trying to advocate and, to understand more. Now, this is Professor Nicole Sifakis and also Dr. Bayurt, Yasmin Bayurt. Like us, they're also non-native speakers. Now, they said, I will not read them through, but let's just look at the bold part there. Yeah, learners, learning profile, previous experience. Yeah, those are what we teachers really need to take into account when we think about in relation to our training today, that we really need to think about when we want to integrate culture. The learner's learning profile, the previous experience, and also the target situation. What do they need the English for? Do they need it for communication or to face exam like IELTS? Yeah, that's something that we still have to consider. Still from them. Now, explore new, creative, and autonomous way of integrating ELF in their own context. Now, I would like you, a fellow teacher, to remember this keyword, context. Yeah, own context. That is one of the takeaway from our presentation today, from the research of English as a lingua franca perspective, integrating language, integrating culture in English language teaching require own context observation. That's the first takeaway. Yeah, and I hope at this point we are now convinced that integrating culture in English language teaching is highly relevant because, based on the research of English as a lingua franca, we can see that in the future, in the very near future, in fact, our students are going to encounter communication with other non-native speakers like themselves who will get influence of their cultural and linguistic background as they speak English. So culture in this case is relevant that way. Okay. By the way, Harga, please remind me if I'm running out of time. There's still lots.
Oh, please,
there's some.
still go ahead.
Okay.
Not yet.
Thank you. This is Professor Jennifer Jenkins, another godmother of the research of English as a lingua franca, and she's based in the University of Southampton, where I am based on as well. And she said that ELT practitioners, which are the teachers, is the one who decide whether or to what extent ELF or the research in English as a lingua franca is relevant to their learners in their context. So the message from this quote is that something that my teacher, Dr. Patricia Grounds, also taught me years ago, and I always remember that. She said that teachers are the experts of their own context. So we are the experts of our own context. And so therefore, the decision and how we are going to integrate culture in English language teaching should be based on our own expertise, our own knowledge towards our classroom. Yeah, it's not what the researcher says. Research can advise, but the final decisions of how we are going to do that is really based on our own expertise, our own understanding to our own context. Yeah, that is the important message from this quote. Now, so the research in English as a lingua franca give us the perspective of how English is used in the communication. And we already see hopefully the reason why it's important to integrate culture in English language teaching. Now, but the direct advice on some of the key principles in relation to pedagogy is provided, for example, by the Global English Language Teaching. This is Nicola Galloway from Glasgow University, sorry. And she said that, again, she talks about context, yeah? Implementing change is challenging, consideration of context-specific factors is necessary, and so on and so on. Yeah, so again, context. So in research of English as a lingua franca and also in global English language teaching, context matter. So the decisions of, for example, which culture is relevant to be integrated in our own context, in our own classroom, is actually not necessarily a native model of English. It's not necessarily not the American British culture. It's also not even any the global culture, if you know what it means by global culture. But it's really your own decision. If American culture matters to you, then, and for your learners, more importantly, then go ahead. If your local culture matters, then that's the global culture then. Yeah, so the context matters here. Very quickly, global English language teaching basically highlight the diverse and the fluid use of English worldwide. Yeah, diverse and fluid. So it's not solely based again to the varieties of native speaker of British or American, but is diverse and fluid. Yeah. And these are some of the key proposals. We are going to focus on number 2 and 5, which is emphasizing the respect for multilingualism in English language teaching. That is one of the most important thing in this in the research in this area. Respect for multilingualism. So something like English only environment is something that we keep questioning, not to challenge, not to against, not to reject, but something we question. And number 5 is emphasizing respect for diverse culture and identity in ELT. So something like one of my students back then commented how weird a certain accent is when they speak English, and that this is not the correct way to speak English because the accent is too thick, the words option is weird, and so on. And this kind of comment that we are trying to challenge. If this kind of comments occur between our students, this is exactly something we might need to discuss with them. Yeah, because again, if we look at if you remember the figure from the previous slide, they are going to encounter this weird dialect and these weird accents in their communications. Okay, the very last one in the terms of theoretical background is transcultural language education. I'm going to invite you to look at this example. Yeah, this is my own data from my master dissertation. This is from my students. Yeah. At the first example, one of my students following the conversations with her Russian students, with her friends, Russian students, she said this to me, Miss, we both like Titan. It was a manga, but then it is made into an anime. I was so surprised that they watch anime in Russia. Now, my questions to you here, are you familiar to that word? Manga, anime, are you familiar? Or are you not? Yes, Maha says yes. 10 more minutes. Oof. Okay. Yes, okay. I'm an anime fan. Okay, yes, okay. Good. Um, which culture, which named culture do you think anime and manga is? If it is belong to any named culture. Japanese? Is it really Japanese? That's the questions the researchers in the cultural in transcultural communications are trying to answer. So is the word like manga or anime, for example, is really Japanese, or is actually something that, or is this kind of communication actually show us how English transgressed and transcend as they occur in the interaction with English as the medium of communication. Yeah. The word like manga or anime here is spoken between Indonesian and Russian. It's probably have a Japanese background, but if you really think about it, I wonder if it's actually Japanese. It's more like, yeah, transcend and transgress to serve the needs of communications between the students. Yeah. And the second example, oh my God, Miss, we have the same bias. Are you familiar with that word bias? I didn't. In the beginning, I didn't. Argo knows. Oh, K-pop, okay. How about others? Are you guys familiar with this bias? The human problem. Yeah, Maha. Exactly. I also have a hard time trying to understand the word bias. So it turns out that bias is the word that is used by K-pop community, not necessarily Korean, but K-pop community. So this is a kind of interdiscourse communication as well. To express the member of a K-pop group that they love the most. That's what bias is. Yeah. So I really have to interview my students to understand what bias means. Yeah. So yeah. See, so is bias Korean? I don't think so. Is bias English? I don't think so. Yeah. So exactly. So this is exactly the example of transcultural communication. This is exactly what happened in the communication using English in the contemporary communication. There are words that actually transgress the borders, whatever borders there are, and turns into something that actually convey meanings like this. Yeah. So let's moving on. I know I have a very limited time now. Okay, this is Will Baker, Dr. Will Baker, and he also happens to be my research as a professor. He says that, okay, so this is another important takeaway. So the decisions of integrating cultures, for example, which culture to integrate in our own English, in our own teaching, really have to be decided in the local setting, based on the needs and the interests of teachers and students. Yeah, researcher may inform and inspire, but the decisions really have to be made locally and to serve the local context. Yeah, that's one of the key takeaway from this research perspective. I'm not going to get through of this, but some of the most important thing from the research on transcultural language education is that it's a critical approach to language, culture, and identity. And it actually reminds me to what Richard shared with us a few months ago in Radical Pedagogy. Yeah, this is also a critical way to see the dominance and the power, the hegemony of English language teaching. Yeah, we as a teacher, we can sit critically, yeah, and hopefully we can deliver the lessons in more suitable way for our students. And it's also related to pragmatic competence and is a positive attitude to difference and other non-native speakers models. So, it's more like to stop our students from thinking that the other accents that is not sounds American or not sounds British are weird and strange and wrong. It's basically it. Yeah. And yeah, the intercultural speakers are the models, which is basically the speakers who can navigate the communications between people from diverse culture and linguistic background rather than native speaker model. That is the message from the transcultural language education. Okay, and this is an important bit, focus on process of communications. No, so yeah, the process that matters, not the result. Yeah, this also means that we can invite our students to involve in the process of communications rather than to focus on form, solely on form. For example, solely on grammar and vocabulary. Yeah. And finally, teaching based on the local context and local culture. Yeah. So which culture is decided locally? and how you are going to deliver it, it's also something that has to be decided locally and to serve the local needs. No longer solely the native model. Okay, these are some of the recommendation of how you can do that. For example, by exploring the complexity of local cultures, exploring the cultural representation, making use of cultural informants, and engage in intercultural communications. We are going to see it very soon and very quickly because I know that I'm running out of time. So let's moving on. Classroom practice. This is, we have discussed the perspective from English as a lingua franca, global English as language education, and transcultural language education. So hopefully have given us some insight of why is it relevant to integrate culture in English language teaching and the how. Yeah, hopefully. Okay, so developing open-mindedness is important. Context matters, and being critical to which language, to which form of English, with the variety of English we would like to deliver to our students. Okay, let me show you this example. So my students, if you look at the right side, one of my students explained this to me. When she has the exchange with her a Russian peer, she said, so Miss, you know, we don't always use English. We use Google to translate from Russian to Indonesian or Indonesian to Russian. And she also showed me pictures from Google when I don't understand what she wants to say. This is exactly also what research in English as a lingua franca and more relevantly the transcultural language educations, that the second bullet point, learner can develop their own agency and ownership of English by drawing on their own linguistic and multimodal repertoire. We let them experiment with their own way to convey their meanings. We don't stop them. Yeah. And why does it matters? Research suggests, and my own classroom practice suggests, when we allow students to, when we develop the students' appreciations toward the variety of the other non-native English speakers, linguistic and cultural background, at the same time, we also develop their agency and the ownership to English, and it's eventually lead to the confidence for them as a legitimate English language speakers. So they don't have to be sound American or sound English to be a legitimate English language speakers. They are who they are, and they are legitimate users. I cannot emphasize more how it can help them to develop their confidence as an English language speaker. Yeah. This is important, but unfortunately, we cannot talk about this further. Indonesian academia developed this in 2023. This is something that I'm sure that you have done in your classroom, that you basically do this, like to learn for, to talk about, in this case, if you look at the purpose of this lesson is to use the expression of asking like and dislike. So this is learning of syntax, yeah. But interestingly, in the exploration part, if you see it, yeah, the teacher invite the students to construct the knowledge of mie balap, which is a local food. Yeah, and writing the sentence about mie balap. So this is the example of exploring the local culture in English. Yeah. If you're interested, I have the journal, so you can read through on how they do that. It's quite practical as well. Yeah. And this is from my own data, my own practice, which is the use of virtual exchange, or what I call as an intercultural telecollaboration, to integrate culture in English language teaching and develop their intercultural and transcultural awareness. If you're interested as well, I do have the publication with me, and you can have it if you want. Yeah. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry to take so much from your time. Yeah, Arga.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for this insightful presentation. One thing that I take away from that quote is you are the master of your context. Wow, that's interesting. I like to pitch an idea from that quote. Okay, so we are actually at the session of questioning. So any of you would like to have some thoughts to ask related to the material in which given by Levi? Anyone? You can voice it yourself, or maybe you can type it. It's up to you. Anyone would like to ask about how perhaps why integrating culture in the teaching English language? Okay. All right, Richard, please.
One second, I was trying to unmute myself. That was a really interesting presentation. Thank you. I really enjoyed that. One thing I did want to ask, slightly strange question in a way. Obviously, Bahasa Indonesia as well is a lingua franca. Like historically, Bahasa Indonesia is not, numerically the majority language for Indonesian people, although the vast majority of Indonesians do speak it fluently. I'm wondering, is this a consideration for the teaching of Bahasa Indonesia as well, making sure that Bahasa Indonesia also reflects Indonesia's many different cultural contexts, the many different types of people who use it? Is this something that's just applicable to English? Could it be applicable to other languages that have lingua franca status, actually like Bahasa Indonesia, or like French, for example, or Arabic? Just curious to know your thoughts on that.
Okay. Levi,
Thank you, Rich. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so this is a very important questions actually. So the research in the English as a lingua franca is actually have developed to some extent to something called English as a multilingua franca. That means that English is actually available as a lingua franca, but it's not necessarily chosen. So of course there is other options. But in fact, if we come back again to the figure in the beginning, we can see that the most spoken language is actually not English, right? It's Chinese. Yeah. So like you, because you speak Chinese, Rich, so you actually speak two of the lingua franca in the world. So in terms of Bahasa Indonesia or the Indonesian language, yes, it's something that I mean, if we talk about integrating culture in English language teaching, we can also integrate Bahasa Indonesia and Indonesian culture, more specifically the local culture, because Indonesian, as many cultures in the world, are very diverse. And in fact, multilingualism and translanguaging is something that is embraced by the research in English as a lingua franca and more specifically in transcultural language education. So researchers in ELF, I think Paulo will also agree with me. We'll all agree that it's really important to develop a class which is multilingual, not English only environment. Yeah, I hope it answers your questions.
It does. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you for the question, Richard. So who's next? Anyone? Come on.
Oh, it's okay.
Because
this is a lot to digest.
Ahmed, unmute.
Yes.
Maybe Ahmed has something to say.
Hello,
Okay.
everybody. So thank you, Leviana, for this fruitful presentation. Thank you, everybody. If I get the point correctly, integrating culture. As an example, for me and for other teachers, teaching a language which is not their mother tongue language. I know that culture is part of the language, isn't it? You cannot teach a language in isolation of its culture. For example, if you are teaching English, I think teachers should do the maximum to know more about English culture, because if you separate it, you get problems sometimes. And now integrating culture, I just have a missing point here. When we say integrating culture, do we mean by this I integrate part of my culture where I am teaching another language? So that's my question. And if it's yes, to what extent I can teach a foreign language and I integrate part of my culture, which I think it's necessary. Thank you, Leviana. That's my question.
Thank you, Ahmed. That's very another important questions, and it's been a long debate about that. Yeah, so yeah, especially between the practitioners. Many teachers actually would argue that how can you many teachers would disagree to some aspect of the research in English as a lingua franca, but it's something that we not to be discussed here. Okay, in relations to your questions, what it means by integrating culture in English language teaching. Throughout the presentations, through the perspective lens of English as a lingua franca, and then global English as language teaching, and also the transcultural language educations, what I would hope to show you is that the decision of which culture you want to integrate is based on your local decisions. Is up to you, really. Yeah. So, for example, if your question is, so do I have to integrate my own culture, or should I integrate, for example, British culture, because we are teaching English? Yeah. Now, first of all, we need to define who is the ownership. That is related to the issue of the ownership of English. Who are the legitimate users of English? So it's quite the complex questions. But in short, I would say that based on your local needs, based on your students' needs and your students' preference, if they, for example, preparing themselves for a high stakes exam or any exam that require them to get in touch with, to understand the American or the British model of English, then it would be okay and relevant for you to teach them British or American culture as a part of your grammar or vocabulary teaching. That's relevant. But in my opinion, when it comes to communication, when the main purpose of the teaching is actually to allow our students to be able to navigate the communications within the global context, then we need to expose them. We need to develop their appreciations of the varieties of English, including their own varieties, which is, in my case, is Indonesian varieties and cultures, and also in your case, maybe a Moroccan context. And so there are some of the practical way to do that. For example, some teachers or some researchers would suggest to expose their learners with the varieties of dialect. And if you want to expose your students with the varieties of the accents and dialect of people speaking English, people around the world speaking English, there are so many corpus that you can use online and free. Yeah, one of them is IDA, if I'm not mistaken. I can remember this is called the IDEA. Yeah, I can send you over the link if you like. Yeah, so that is one of the practical way to do that. So again, I need to emphasize that in the research of English as a lingua franca, context matters. If your context require you to teach the American or British varieties of English, then go ahead with that. But if it's just for the communication, for navigating the communications in the contemporary words, then exposing and develop the appreciations toward the varieties of English matters. I hope it answers. I don't know.
Yeah, it really does. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, wait, before we proceed, I would like to ask Richard, why are you raising your hand? Do you have, because we have another question here, but question from Maha is also related to Ahmed. It's so
should I? Yeah.
proceed to Maha, or I would like to ask Richard, what was that raising hand is about?
I just an observation I wanted to make, that was all, just a very quick one. When we're talking about it's actually just to pick up on the previous question. When we talk about teaching the target culture, historically we've meant UK English or US English. We've meant a certain type of white Western culture. Because let's be honest, we're talking about the white parts of those culture as well very often. We're not recognizing that our own societies are multicultural in the model of English we've been promoting. If we think about teaching global English, you know, teaching English as a lingua franca, if we think of global culture as the target culture, that might help. But one of my concerns with that is that you're replacing one elitism with another elitism, because standard homogenized global culture, let's be honest, is the culture of big business. It's the culture of very particular wealthy transnational interests who present their culture as if it's neutral. So I think I very much agree with this approach that's rooted in diversity and that's rooted in respecting and recognizing how diverse the users of English are. So I just wanted to add that observation.
All right, thank you. Well, according to Maha here, his questions also related to Ahmed. I think half of his, the essence of his question has been answered throughout the Rich and also Levi's explanation. But do please add some more if you would like to. So Maha asked, how can we introduce the target culture to children without eliminating theirs?
Yeah, that is exactly what we have to do. Yeah. The first thing that we have to think about is what it means by the target culture. Yeah, that's again, we need to be one of the message in the perspective that we learned today is actually to be critical. Yeah, no, starts from us as the teacher, and hopefully we can deliver it to the students. So what does it mean by the target culture? Is it English, British or American culture? If it matters for you, then yes, yeah, that means that's your target culture. Because again, for example, you need it for your to prepare your students to study in the UK, for example. Yeah, but it's actually related to what it says. When I moved to Southampton, I started to realize that if I learn English solely based on British variety of English, it won't help me a lot here in Southampton, because Southampton turned out to be very multicultural. UK is a very multicultural country. Yeah, so yeah, that's we need to be critical about what target culture is. Yeah, and of course we don't eliminate theirs, our own culture. That's exactly what we have to do. And so therefore, again, we need to pay attention on our own context. And how do we understand our context? In my case and in my research, what I argue is that action research, the classroom-based research. We research our own classroom. We observe and research what our student needs, and basically the dimensions of the context we have, and then after that we can decide which culture that we want to integrate in our context. Is it our local culture? is it British or American culture? Is it any other culture? Yeah, it's yeah, we need to be critical with that. But I agree, Maha, you actually get the essence of the presentation today, that we should not eliminate our own culture when we teach English. I noticed
Okay.
that some students lose their culture along the way. Oh no. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Okay, so I think because of the time, I think it's best if we move along to the next breakout room session. And one more thing, Levi, I'm sorry. The way you pronounce the name of your university, I feel bad. I mispronounced it in the earlier. Sorry.
That's all right.
Okay.
Not a big deal.
All right, so let's move on to the next section, which is the breakout room. And in the breakout room, we will discuss related to how and why integrating culture in the English language teaching, correct?
Yes, so I'm sorry, I'm just going to share the questions, if that's okay, like the questions
Yeah.
to help us. Yeah. Hold on a second. Just going to move. Okay, here we go.
To what we are going to discuss in the breakout room. So feel free if you want to screenshot or take notes from this, and later on we will have a full conversation related to these two questions.
Interest, whether short stories, movie reviews, articles online, and then they translate it into English or Arabic and write a report about the online tools they have used in finding the right terminologies or in improving their language. So through texts, through such individual projects, we can introduce our students to the multicultural aspects of any country around the world, especially about Britain, about the US, and so on. So this is my opinion. It's not that difficult, but we can introduce aspects of this culture to broaden their minds, to let them know better. يعني, I want to mention this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Wissam. Actually, Wissam is from the breakout room too, so thank you for representing us indirectly. Wow, such a relief. Thank you, Wissam. All right, so to collect all of these, so wait. Let me go back to the screen. Hold on, let me share screen. Wait. Okay. All right, so we have all discussed about this topic, the given two perspective, and then each group really represent their ideas well. You have shared your experience and also your ideas and any possible movement or the outcome that will have us in the future. And it's indeed very challenging, especially if we are aiming for a targeted culture, or maybe we would like to introduce our own native using English. And that's the challenge, how we actually shift the landscape. Okay, so before I close this, I think I've already sent in the chat. Oh, let me send it again. The link for you to claim the certificate. Hold on. There you go. Okay. And I think by this we have already reached the end of our discussion. Wait, yeah. I would like to thank you for all of your contribution, participation, and thank you, Levi, for bringing us this insightful presentation. It's really it really breach our perspective to what is the upcoming uh, idea that ahead of us. So thank you so much for all of your participation and discussion. It's really, really nice. And of course, I look forward to see you guys in the next episode of our mini workshop. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, and by the way, can we have a group photo
Oh
very
yeah.
quickly though?
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Sure. Hold on. Hold on. I think you should stop share screen it.
You know,
I can.
it's just a very quick comment in terms of research, because my feet are between researcher and practitioners, and what I hear from you today is very insightful, because researcher can say many things, but eventually in terms of the applications in the reality, it's really important to listen from the teachers as the decision makers in the classroom. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay. All right. Let me take the picture. 3, 2, 1. Okay. All right.